The last time Susan stood on a stage, she was singing at her daughter's funeral. Now, 2 years later, she walks onto the biggest stage of her life, not for fame, but to keep a promise to a 7-year-old who is no longer here. What the judges are about to hear is not just a song, it is a message from beyond the grave. Before we begin, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and join this incredible community. Your support helps us share stories that truly matter. The story you are about to see begins in a small, worn-down house on the outskirts of Cleveland, Ohio. For Susan, a 53-year-old widow, the silence in that house was the loudest sound in the world. It was a silence that started 2 years ago, on a rainy Tuesday in October, when a distracted driver ran a red light and took her entire world with him. Her daughter, Lily, a bright-eyed girl who dreamed of being a singer, was gone. And with her, the last piece of music in Susan's life died too. Susan had been a choir teacher for 30 years. Her life was a symphony of children's voices, of scales and arpeggios, of holiday concerts and spring recitals. But after the accident, she couldn't even listen to the radio. Every melody felt like a knife. She stopped teaching, stopped seeing friends, stopped living. She existed in a gray, soundproof bubble, haunted by the ghost of her daughter's laugh. One day, while finally gathering the courage to clean out Lily's room, a task she had put off for 2 long years, she found a small, hand-decorated envelope tucked beneath Lily's pillow. Inside was a crayon drawing of 2 stick figures on a big stage, one tall with gray scribbles for hair, and one small with a crown. Scrawled in a 7-year-old's wobbly handwriting were the words, "For when you sing on the big TV, Mommy. I will be listening." Susan broke down. She had completely forgotten. A few weeks before the accident, they had been watching a talent show together, and Lily had grabbed her hand, her little eyes wide with excitement. "Mommy, you have to go on that show. You're the best singer in the whole world." Susan had laughed it off, but Lily, ever persistent, had made her promise. And now, here was the receipt for that promise, a piece of paper that was more precious than gold. That drawing became Susan's reason. She dug out her sheet music, the dust motes dancing in the light like long-lost friends. She began to practice, her voice cracking and raw at first, a rusty instrument long neglected. She sang the songs she used to sing to Lily every night, a lullaby her own grandmother had taught her, a song about a star that guides you home. It was the only song she could sing without completely shattering. Months later, Susan found herself backstage at the biggest talent show in America. The lights were blinding, the noise was a chaotic assault, and the other contestants were decades younger, buzzing with a confidence she couldn't fathom. She clutched a worn photograph of Lily in one hand and the crayon drawing in the other. Her hands were shaking so badly she thought she might drop them. When her name was called, the walk to center stage felt like a mile. She looked out at the 4 famous judges, their faces a mixture of curiosity and polite expectation. She saw the massive, expectant crowd, a sea of shadows beyond the lights. The silence before she began was the same terrible silence of her empty house. Then, the music started. A soft, simple piano melody. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in 2 years, she let the silence break. She opened her mouth and began to sing. Her voice was not the polished, technically perfect sound you usually hear on these shows. It was something else entirely. It was raw, it was real, it was filled with a pain so profound it was almost unbearable to witness. It was the sound of a mother singing to her child across an impossible distance. The lullaby floated through the auditorium, and a hush fell over the crowd that was deeper than silence. It was a collective holding of breath. As she reached the second verse, her voice began to gain strength. It was no longer just a lullaby of loss, but a declaration of love that refused to be silenced by death. The melody swelled, and Susan poured every memory, every tear, every moment of joy she had shared with Lily into the notes. One of the judges, a famously tough critic, had tears streaming down her face. Another had his hand over his mouth, his eyes wide with disbelief. And then came the twist that no one saw coming. In the middle of the song, during a brief instrumental break, the huge screen behind the stage flickered to life. The producers, who had learned Susan's story during rehearsals, had prepared a surprise. On the screen appeared a home video, old and grainy. It was Lily, no older than 4, sitting on Susan's lap. In the video, little Lily was singing along to the same lullaby, her tiny voice off-key but absolutely determined, while Susan smiled and guided her. Susan heard the video before she saw it. Her own daughter's voice, echoing through the same auditorium, as if from heaven. She turned and saw Lily's face on the giant screen, her bright eyes, her missing front tooth. The air left Susan's lungs. For a moment, she thought she might collapse. But then, something miraculous happened. She didn't stop singing. Instead, she turned back to the audience, and her voice merged with the recording of her daughter's. The auditorium filled with the impossible, beautiful sound of a duet between the living and the departed. The audience erupted, not in applause, but in sobs. When the song ended, there was a moment of absolute stillness. No one moved. No one breathed. Then, the entire auditorium rose to its feet in a thunderous ovation that seemed to shake the very foundation of the building. Susan stood there, trembling, tears carving paths through her makeup, holding onto the photograph of her daughter as if it were a life raft. The judges looked at each other. The female judge who had been crying was the first to stand. Then the others followed. The crowd was going wild, screaming for more. The famous British judge, known for his brutal honesty, simply wiped his eyes and said, "I have nothing to say. That was the most extraordinary thing I have ever witnessed." Then, the third judge, a former supermodel, walked around the judges' table and walked onto the stage. She approached Susan, and without a word, she wrapped her arms around her in a tight embrace. The crowd roared even louder. The judge stepped back, looked Susan in the eyes, and said, "That promise you made to your little girl. You kept it. And for that, you deserve the world." She walked back to her seat and turned to the other judges. They all nodded. The audience seemed to know what was coming. They were on their feet, screaming, crying, begging for it. The British judge leaned into his microphone and shouted over the noise, "Susan, this is not just about a voice. This is about the human spirit. This is about a mother's love. And for that, we have only one response." He slammed his hand down on the golden buzzer. Golden confetti exploded from the ceiling like a storm of pure light. It fell in shimmering waves, blanketing the stage, catching in Susan's gray hair, and landing at her feet like stars. Susan looked up, watching the confetti fall, and in her mind, she saw Lily's face, laughing, clapping, finally seeing her mommy on the big TV. She sank to her knees in the middle of all that gold, clutching her daughter's picture to her heart, and for the first time in 2 years, the silence in her life was filled with the most beautiful noise in the world, the sound of thousands of people cheering for the promise she kept. From which part of the country are you watching this video tonight? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one.